welcome back. My name is Lexi Jong, and here I like to talk about luxury makeup. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at the Nude by Terry palette that came out for the holidays. This is one of the Paris palettes, so it's the V.I.P Expert palette in number 3, Paris Mon Amour. And as you can see, the box looks gorgeous, and this here is the package on the outside. So, I mean, it's gorgeous. So you've got this like pink metallic with purple embossing, and you've got this gorgeous Parisian scene here. This palette is made in Italy. There are 10 1.35 gram shadows in here. And we do have a full-size mirror, and it comes with this little brush. So, you know, you've got the angled liner brush here and a little one here. Personally, I find this to be a little flimsy, so it's not something that I will be using, but it's always nice to have something in a palette just in case, you know, you're traveling or something with it for these larger palettes, but for me, they're wasted space. So this here is the palette, and I have used this several times now. You can see that there's not a ton of powder kick up from the shadows. Now, I do have a sort of like a first impressions of this. The first time I tried this out was with the product update and get ready with me video a few days ago. So if you are interested in that, you know, I'll leave that linked down below. But with that video, I used one of the Danessa Myricks Color Fix products as a base and then put these on top. So today I will be showing you some looks that I created with different primers and without a primer. So I do have a wear test that I have included. So in that wear test, I have one eye with primer, one eye without. And I have tried the Hourglass primer, the NARS primer, and the Viseart primer with these shadows. They've all worked really well. So just one thing to note though, primer is not technically necessary with these shadows. They lasted all day even without the primer. One thing that the By Terry website does note is they recommend actually setting your eyeshadow. So it says in the directions on how to use, it tells you to apply your eyeshadow using the eye brush, blah, 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 or fingers. And then it does mention that metallic shades can be used wet, and it recommends setting your eyeshadow afterwards. I've never seen that before, but it recommends using the Hydra powder from By Terry and just lightly dusting that on top of your eyeshadows. I did not try that. I don't find it to be necessary. So let's take a look at this palette. And I have to say that the photos online made it look a lot rosier than than what I see in person. So I think it's actually prettier and more useful for me in person than it was from the photos that I saw, because these shadows, for the most part, you know, you've got a range of neutrals and you've got some warmer tones and some cooler tones in here. We're going to take a look at swatches first. So we are going to start off with the top row. I'm going to start with the first 4 here. And you can see just by looking at the pan that we have a mix of finishes. So we've got matte shades and metallic shades and satin finishes as well. Apologize, my hands are kind of dry, but these are the first 4 in the top row. So you can see that that 4th shade there has a little bit of a duochrome effect to it. This is the last shade in the top row. These are the first 4 in the bottom row. And the last shade in the palette. And you can see that one really blends in with my skin, so it's hard to see. So let's take a second and go over these swatches. The first shade here in the pan, it looks like a straight up ivory. So that's this shade here. It's basically just like an ivory cream shade. It's a matte shade. Then we have a satin finish, and this is a brown, and in the pan, I feel like it's this one here. It looks a little bit cooler tone, more like a typical taupe shade, but when you actually put it on the skin, you can see that it is a warm brown. So it's a soft, warm brown shade, but there's definitely like a little bit of red and yellow in here. And then we have a pink metallic shade, And you can see that it can sheer out to kind of this soft ballet pink. It's a bit frosty, or you can really build it up and get something a bit more vibrant. Next, we have this shade here, which is a duochrome. And in the pan, that's this one here, you can actually see the color shift as it changes. So this one has a little bit of pink, a little copper, some peach, you know, a little bit of gold in it. And it's a duochrome in a way, but not in a typical duochrome way. Like you can see glints of all of those shades in my opinion, but you're not seeing like an entire shift of color. So typically with a duochrome, when you put that shade all over your lid and then you shift it, you see like, for example, half your lid is like a completely different color. And that's not what you get with this, but you do see the different glints of colors in there. So it's more like a multifaceted metallic shade. Next up, this is the last shade in the top row, and we have a cool tone brown, and it's a little bit hard to see until you actually build the shade up, but there is some purple in here. There's like a deep purple base to it, and that's what lends some of the coolness to it. I actually think it works really well. I really like this shade, and just so you know that all of these shades, they have performed very well. Next up in the bottom row, this is like a coppery brown, and you can kind of see some glints of cranberry in there. It's very pretty, and this will be a warm toned, kind of like a rich medium brown. And then we have this gold shade, and that's this one here in the palette. And it's like a bronzy gold, but you can see that it's soft in color. This is the only shade in the palette that I've had some trouble with. It's a little bit drier than the rest of the shadows. So, you know, it goes on better if you're using it in a soft application, but building it up, I just find that it doesn't work that well because it is a little bit on the drier side. So it just doesn't really stay put as well when you try to build this one up. So this gold shade is not my favorite. And then we have this metallic cranberry, and you can see this one has a red base to it, and there's a little bit of yellow undertones in here. This is definitely a warm red, but it's a very gorgeous kind of warm cranberry shade. And then we have this is actually like a satin finish taupe here. This is my favorite shade in here, and it's a warm taupe. So most taupes are going to be like a cooler tone. You see more hints of gray. This one is actually going to be a little bit warmer tone. You have a little bit more warmth to it than a typical taupe, but it has a gorgeous satin finish, and I really love this shade. And then last up, you can barely see it, but it is a matte shade. That's this one here, and you can see a little bit. There's a tiny bit of peachy rosiness to it, but it's basically like ivory mixed with peach and rose. It's very light. So as I mentioned, all of the shades perform very well, except for really this gold shade. That one just is just a little bit drier than the rest, but it still works. It's still, you know, you can definitely do some nice things with it, but it's not my favorite. All of the metallics really blend beautifully. The mattes blend beautifully. I think everything is very nice. The only thing is sometimes a couple of the shades seem a little deceptive when you see them in the pan. For example, this one here, I kept wanting to use this one, you know, I kept thinking it would be a cooler tone brown than it really is. And you can just see, you know, that some of them ended up being slightly different than they actually appear in the pan, just like the undertones to it. So that was, it just, once you use them and you know how they work, no problems. But you can see that some of the shades here just don't look quite as strong as they do on the arm. So, I mean, this one here with this one, you can see there's a little bit of a difference between how they appear on my arm. Nothing major. It's really just like a slight change in the undertones from what it looks like in the pan, in my opinion. I'm going to share the clips of the wear test right now and the 2 additional looks I created. Then we're going to meet back here and we've got a bunch of color comparisons to do, and I will give you my final thoughts on the palette. Okay, we are going to be doing a wear test with the By Terry palette today, and I have the NARS eye primer on my right eye and nothing on the left. We're going to start off with the Sonia G Classic Crease, and we're going into this bottom. It's kind of like a peachy ivory shade. And we're going to dust this in the upper portion of the crease up to the brow bone. Next, I'm taking the same brush. I'm going into this brown shade that says Terribly. And I'm going to put this in the crease as well. And this time I'm focusing in the actual crease. Let's get a little more product here. Next, I'm taking the Sonia G Soft Shader into this one here with the Eiffel Tower. You can see that this one here is a little bit of a duochrome. You've got some pink, some copper, and a little bit of gold, kind of all mixed in there. It's subtle though. It's really more that they are mixed versus shifting. Next, we're going to go into this coppery brown with the Fireworks. This one looks like it has different shades kind of mixed in here as well. I see gold, I see copper, and I see, I can't tell what color it is. It's like there are glints of maybe like a cranberry in there, but you're not actually seeing any like reddish shade on the lid. It's just sort of like when you shift your head, sometimes you kind of think you see a flash of cranberry. And not the whole lid, just like little, like not even sparkles, but like little particles. All right, so I'm gonna go back into the shade with the Eiffel Tower now, and I'm gonna add a little bit more of this right here on the edge, and I'm going over the line where they meet. So this shade is definitely lighter than the brown shade, and I just wanted to get a little bit more of a transition. I'm just gonna take a touch of this cranberry shade here with my finger and put that right on the center. You can see it's like a metallic red shade. Just putting this right where the two meet. For the lower lash line, I'm going back into this shade that says Terribly on it, and I'm using the Chikahodu. This is the F07. Just gonna put this on the lower lash line here. And for the inner corner, I'm going back into this kind of ivory shade, and I'm using the F07 again. Just for a touch of brightening, and since this is like a matte shade, it's not super noticeable. And just finishing up with a classic crease and just blending anything there. Now for the upper lash line, I'm using this by Terry. This is the Stilo Black Star, which is more of an eyeliner, and this is the shade number 2, Purpulin Gem. I'm gonna add this to the upper lash line. You can see it's nice, fat, and chubby. And this is the eye look up close. I think this particular look with this one here that kind of shifts, kind of like coppery, rosy pink and everything, it's just a little bit too much of a warm pink on my eyes. Like it's just not something I really love. And I think adding the purple along the lash line kind of helps take away from that and add in like a little bit something different. So I'm gonna add some mascara and I'll show you the final look in a minute. And this is the final look from a distance. So I have on the Westman Atelier foundation stick in shade N, the Westman Atelier Baby Cheeks blush stick in Doo Doo, along with the Pot de Soleil, the super loaded tinted highlight. And for mascara, I used the Guerlain Matte Eyes mascara in brown. And on my lips, I have the Chanel lip liner in number 164 P1 with the Chanel Camellia lipstick from last year, number 637 Camellia Porpora, which is this really pretty like purple burgundy. And that is everything. Thanks. It has been between 5.5 and 6 hours now since I applied the eyeshadow, and you can see that from a distance, everything still looks the same. I'm gonna bring you in closer. My right side has the NARS primer on, and I have nothing on the left. And I think both eyes still look the same. So here's no primer, and here's primer. So everything's holding up well. It has been just over 10 hours now since I applied everything, and you can see from a distance, everything still looks great. Let me bring you in closer. So when you take a look at the eyeshadow now, my right side that has the NARS primer, you know, it's holding up perfectly, no issues whatsoever. And the side without any primer, it looks at first glance like everything's holding up just as well, but you can see if you look super closely that I'm starting to get a line right by the crease. So it hasn't actually creased yet, but it's coming. So again, we're just past the 10-hour mark. I think, you know, considering no primer for that long and it looks this good, I'm totally happy with that. It has now been 14 hours since I applied everything, and this is what the eyes look like from a distance. So overall, I still think the side without the primer looks good from a distance. Not great. We're going to take a closer look in a second. But the side with the NARS primer still looks pretty much fresh. So this here is with the NARS primer. And you can see that there's no creasing, no real fading or anything of the shadows. I don't have any additional fallout or anything. And this here is the side without any primer. And when we last checked in, we could see that this line was starting to form. The line hasn't really progressed. There's really no true like creasing there. I mean, there's a little bit of a crease, but not to the point where I'm actually getting all the way to the skin. However, what has really happened a lot in the last few hours is fading of the eyeshadow. So you can see that I've got more of this more metallic look down closer to the lash line compared to over here. And it's really kind of like faded or shifted. Again, I don't have fallout on my face from it, so I'm not really sure exactly where all of that has settled, but I definitely have some lines in the lid and lack of metallic shimmer on half of the eyelid, essentially. So with and without primer. Now, again, this has been 14 hours, and I think at the 10.5-hour mark, everything still looked good. So with or without primer, so I don't think a primer is necessary unless you're going to have a super long day with these shadows. Okay, so I have the V.I.P primer on my eyes today, and we are going to start off with the Jumbo Blender from the Sonia G Kiyaki set. And I'm going to do a very simple neutral look today. We're going to go into this cream shade down here at the bottom. And I'm going to just kind of apply this all over. So this is like a peachy cream shade. So I'm pushing this into the crease, but I have it on the flat part as well. So it's kind of going in a broad, you know, it's covering from here to here essentially. Then I'm going to add a little bit of depth with the mini booster with this shade, this brown shade here called Terribly. So I'm just getting a little bit of this on the tip, and I'm putting this right here gently in the crease. And then I'm taking the same brush, I wiped it off. I'm going into this deep brown matte. I'm going to add just a little bit of this to the outer portion here. See that smokes out very nicely. Like I could totally like just grade that in. I wiped off this brush and I'm just going to kind of feather this out a little bit to about the halfway point so it has more of a natural gradation. I'm going back in with the Jumbo Blender, and I'm going to go into this shade here that says Paris. It's like a taupe shade with a little bit of shimmer. I'm gonna put this all over. After wiping off the jumbo blender, I'm just gonna kind of smooth this crease area. The one brown shade that I used was the one that I used to deepen it, was just a little bit warmer than these other shades. So I want to diffuse it a little bit. Next, I'm taking the flat definer from Sonia G and I'm going into this pink shade with the fireworks. And I'm using the flat edge of this and just adding a little bit of this to the inner corner here. Now to line the upper lash lines, I'm going to go into this metallic brown with the fireworks. I'm using the Sonia G Pencil 1. I just got it a little damp with some water. And I just kind of want like more of a smudged look on the upper lash line. And what's left on the brush is going in the lower lash line here. Wiping off the brush, I'm going into this gold shade next to it, and I'm just adding this to the inner half of the lower lash line. You can see this one is a bit chunkier. It's more fallout prone. And this is my final eye look up close. So this is the final look from a distance. I have to say I really like this look. I think it's a great everyday neutral eye look. You could definitely glam it up a little bit more. And I think the finishes on the shadows give it a nice sophistication. So I finished everything off with the Chanel Les Chaînes de Chanel Holiday Blush and just a little tiny bit of the Guerlain. This is the Terracotta Stick Illuminator, the highlighting stick in shade Nude. And I have on the Chanel Gloss in number 119. And that's everything. I have the Hourglass Veil Eye Primer on. We're starting off with the Sonia G Flat Definer from the Kiyaki set. And I'm going to go into this deep matte brown. And I'm using the flat side of the flat definer. So like this. I'm going to put this right along the lash line here. And I'm not really worried about how neat I'm being. Something you don't notice about this brown unless you use it in a larger area like this is it has kind of an aubergine, deep purple tint to it. So it's not a flat brown. So I wiped off the flat definer and now I'm just taking it and kind of feathering out these edges just a touch. Next, I'm taking the Builder 3 into this cranberry shade, and this is a Sonia G brush. And I'm just gonna I'm going over that line where they meet. I have no idea what I'm doing today, just kind of plain. And just with what's left on the brush, I'm going all the way down to lower lash line, but very lightly. So I still have that brown peeking through. I'm taking the Blender Pro from Sonia G into the taupe shade that used to say Paris. I'm gonna put this right here in the crease. And then I'm going to lighten everything on the lid by going into the pink with the fireworks. And this is the Jumbo Blender from the Sonia G Kiyaki set. So this ended up being a frosty look, but you still have different shades in there. It's not a great look, but you know, sometimes you play around with things and they turn out well, and other times they don't. All right, to line the eyes, I'm going back in with the flat definer, but this time I'm using the tip. I'm going into the matte brown. Okay, so I wiped off the brush and now I'm just spreading it to the rest of the under eye. And this is the final look from a distance. So I'm wearing the Crescendo Moisture Foundation. I have on the By Terry blush in number 4, Nude Dance. These are the ones I don't think they make anymore that are just a solid color. And then I have on the new Chanel Le Lion lipstick in Beige Ardent, which is number 237. And the Guerlain Meteorites in the Golden Bee from this year's holiday collection. That's everything. Okay, I hope that was helpful. We're going to start off with some color comparisons. First, we're going to start off with the Dior palette in number 669 Soft Cashmere. These are the first 3 shades in Soft Cashmere and the last 2. So here's Soft Cashmere. Here's the By Terry, and you can see that there are some similarities with some of the shades, but overall Soft Cashmere runs a little bit cooler. The deep browns, the one in the By Terry is actually going to be a little bit cooler tone than the one in Soft Cashmere, but you can see that this shade here is going to be pretty similar to this middle shade in the Soft Cashmere palette. However, the Soft Cashmere one is slightly cooler. Let me put those next to each other so you can see that. So here's Soft Cashmere. So they are fairly similar, but there's a little bit more yellow in the By Terry. And let me just show you this deep brown one here. You can see here that the By Terry one, you can see a little bit more of that purple base, but they are pretty similar. The By Terry is just slightly cooler. Otherwise though, the shades really don't match up. Next, let's take a look at the Tom Ford First Frost quad. So here are these 4 shades. And you can see that these are all going to be frosty and shimmery. So obviously the light shade, we don't have anything that matches that in the By Terry since it is frosty. And then the pink here you can see is going to be much softer and more subtle than the pinks in the By Terry. This is definitely much more bubblegum pink versus ballet pink in the First Frost. Let me, you can see that there. This is definitely much more neutral. And then the brown shades here, you know, they don't truly match up either. We've got this one here is similar to this, but again, it's going to be cooler in tone. You can see it's even cooler in tone than the one in the Dior palette. So it's really going to be a little bit lighter here. I'll swatch those together. So I'm going to put this one right in the middle here. So you can see that this is going to be a little bit of a cooler brown than either the Soft Cashmere or the By Terry. And the deep brown doesn't really have a match anywhere with the By Terry. We are running out of space. This is the Pat McGrath Divine Rose. We're going to start off with this shade here in the middle, which is Sable Bronze. And we're going to go over here to this side, put that right there. And you can see, I thought they might be kind of similar, but you can see that the one in the By Terry is much richer, has a bit more red in it than the Pat McGrath. This is the VR Rose Venus, and we're going to compare this to this duochrome shade here with By Terry. You can see that those are pretty similar. The By Terry is just slightly darker, but that's more of a formula difference. The formula for the By Terry feels a little bit thicker and creamier, whereas the Pat McGrath is really smooth and thin. You know, it's just like a different texture, but the color is almost spot on with those two. And we'll just compare this gold shade here. This is the Polished Gold 002. And we'll compare that with the gold for the By Terry. Let's put that right here. All right, the Pat McGrath is definitely much more yellow, much more of a true gold. And then this is Noir Fumé from Tom Ford. We're just going to compare these as well. All right, I'm going to put these here and then we can match up anything. So this light cream ivory shade, you know, it's slightly warmer in the Tom Ford than this one, but it's kind of a good mix between the two light matte shades. And then this one here, the second shade in the Tom Ford, let's squeeze that in right here. It is slightly cooler there. And then the fourth shade, you can see it's got more black than these two here. This is really, I mean, it looks black in the pan, but it's really like one of those dark ember brown black shades. And then the third shade doesn't really match up. And last up, we have this red shade here from Lethal Cosmetics. This is in the Lethal Cosmetics and Camera Ready Cosmetics mix here. We're gonna put this right here. Yep, those two match up really well, actually. So you can see that those red shades really work. That is all I have for comparisons. Now, as for my thoughts on the actual palette, I really like this palette and I am happily surprised that it is more neutral than I expected. I would say that this palette is good for neutral lovers, but it does lean a little warm. More shades lean warm than cool. So again, sorry, it's so messy now, but you've got these great light matte shades, which work really well for people with light complexions. I think they probably should have added in another matte that was kind of like more of a middle shade, because these two are so similar to each other. You don't really need both of them in the palette. But I really like the different range of browns that you have here. You've got cooler and warmer tone browns in here. You know, as I mentioned, I really love the soft taupe shade in here. I love having the mix of finishes, the satin, the metallics, the matte shades, and the fact that they all work really well. And again, this gold shade right here, which is this one, that one, you know, it's definitely the least favorite of mine in this palette because it just doesn't perform as well as the others. But in general, the metallics in this palette, if you use your finger, they do feel rather creamy. They're not going to be as soft and creamy as a Natasha Denona metallic shade. So, you know, even when you use them with your finger or anything, you need to work in steps. So you're going to get a little on your finger, put it on, get a little bit more, and so forth. So it's not going to be like a super creamy, more wet type formula, but it works really well. They build up well. Using them wet with a brush really does make them vibrant. And I think overall, you know, it's a really nice neutral palette to have. Now, this palette, as it mentions on their website, it says specifically, you know, buy this to use or buy it as a collector's item. And if you are interested in, you know, things with the Parisian scenes and everything, this is a gorgeous collector's item. The actual eyeshadows, you know, they look like little boxes of chocolates with the little imprints and everything. I think is really well done. I think it is beautiful. And I think it would make a really lovely gift. Now, do you need to have this palette? No, there are enough neutrals in here, and even the other shades are similar enough to other palettes that if you have any of the ones that I already compared, you know, you can probably make do with what you have. So it's not necessary to have this palette, but it is a very nice palette. It's a very nice curated collection, and I think it's great for wearable everyday looks, or if you want to vamp it up. So if you're somebody who travels a lot, I think this would be a great palette for traveling. Obviously, nobody's really doing that so much right now, but I think it's really great for traveling because you have that variety of finishes in there and you've got a lot of neutrals in here. And then obviously some brighter, more fun accents. So you can do a whole range. You know, if you're traveling for work, you've got like work type looks, you've got soft daytime looks, You can amp things up. You've got that fun duochrome. So there are so many things you can do with this palette that I think it's a great versatile palette to have. However, if you already have these shades in other palettes, it's not really necessary. Now, as to whether I would repurchase this, yes, I would. I think it is a gorgeous palette. Not only is the packaging really stellar, but I really think the curation of colors in this palette works well for me because you do have the mix of the warmer tones and the cooler tones in here. And I do think they could add a few more cooler tones in here. It's still, again, more warm than cool, but I love the mix of neutrals in here along with some of the brighter pops of color, as well as the different finishes. I think adding in like a fun, more like, I don't know, I want to call it a duochrome, but this fun metallic shade and everything. Those little additions, really kind of take this palette to be something a little bit more versatile than maybe another palette you have with primarily neutral shades in it. So yes, I really like this palette. And by Terry, I think they have like a 20% off on their website right now. So definitely check out for codes if you are interested in purchasing it. It is limited edition, and the ones that came out last year, the night and day palettes, those were also limited edition. The day palette they were both around for quite a while. Like they were both around a couple months ago. So it seems like they have plenty of stock, so you don't have to rush and make a decision right away. The night palette is still currently available. The day palette, though, has been sold out for quite a while and I believe is not set to return. So all of that just to say that I don't know how long this will stay in stock, but based on their previous Paris palettes, I would say that you've got a good chance that this will be around for quite a while and you don't have to rush to make a decision. So I hope this review was helpful. And again, I do have my first look with this palette in the Get Ready With Me product update video if you're interested in that. And I think the performance of these shadows were great. It's not necessary to use a primer, but if you do use one, it just extends the longevity a little bit longer. And I think everything held up really well. One of the things I have to note is fallout was really minimal with these. There were a couple of shades, like the gold one that I said was a little bit drier. That one I did have some fallout with. And, otherwise I didn't have fallout due to the actual shades, more so due to application. For example, if I'm using like a liner brush and I ended up swiping instead of patting, then I ended up with a tiny bit of fallout, but nothing major and definitely not an issue. I hope this review is helpful, and if you like this video, please be sure to hit the thumbs up sign. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you all have a wonderful day or night. See you soon.